COVID fines for lockdown breaches and COVID passports. You've all had cause to talk about them, complain about them, argue about them, and today I'm going to talk about them. But first of all, if you are just joining our legal community here and you've got questions of your own, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so that you don't miss out on future videos. We all think of fixed penalty notices as being £100, but a COVID lockdown breach could attract a £10,000 fine. More than 85,000 fines have been issued across England and more than 8,000 in Wales. But were they all justified and were they all proportionate? Well, the Joint Committee on Human Rights said it had significant concerns. Now, you'll probably agree that there had to be some level of control, but the committee chairwoman, Harriet Harman QC, said that the whole process disproportionately hits the less well-off and criminalises the poor over the better off. Also, unsurprisingly, that the police had a difficult job to enforce these because there was a lack of legal clarity. And furthermore, that those that couldn't afford to pay the fine faced a criminal record, and all of the consequences that would entail and impact on their future lives. There was a government response on the COVID-19 fixed penalty notices released on the 21st of April, which I'll link below, and I'm going to go through some of that today. So starting with the legal framework and what these fixed penalty notices were in the first place, I'm sure some of them may surprise you. First of all, in the category of lockdowns and restrictions on leaving the home and restrictions on small gatherings, a contravention could land you a £200 fine, reduced to £100 like a standard fixed penalty if paid within 14 days. But these fines would double for each subsequent offence, up to a maximum of £6,400 for the sixth and each subsequent offence thereafter. Those that held gatherings of more than 15 people in contravention of the lockdown rules faced an £800 fine, reduced to £400 again if paid within 14 days. And again, this would double with each subsequent offence, up to the same maximum of £6,400 for the sixth and each subsequent offence thereafter. Illegal raves and large gatherings were those that prominently hit the news, and these attracted a £10,000 fine for each and every offence. Also, those attempting to leave the United Kingdom in contravention of the rules faced a £5,000 fine for each and every offence. Now, as for face masks, exemptions aside, I'm sure all of you know someone that simply refused to wear one. But similarly, they attracted fixed penalty notices of their own. £200 for the first offence, reducing again to £100 if paid within 14 days. And again, these penalties would double with each and every subsequent offence, up to the maximum of £6,400 for the sixth and each subsequent offence thereafter. Similarly, I'm sure you all know someone who failed to self-quarantine having tested positive for COVID-19. This would land you with a £1,000 fixed penalty notice, again doubling with each subsequent offence. This time the maximum being £10,000 for the fourth offence and each subsequent offence thereafter. Now that's given you an idea of what the penalties are, let's look at how this government report talks about how they were policed and enforced. In April 2020, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner set out what they called the 4 E's when policing under these rules. Those were to engage, explain, encourage, and only if absolutely necessary, to enforce. And throughout all of the lockdowns, the highest number of fixed penalty notices issued has been in the January to March of 2021 lockdown. But what about those penalty notices that have been wrongly issued or where there's been unlawful discrimination? And that is where this report gets interesting. So first of all, just to explain, if someone is issued with one of these penalty notices but doesn't or refuses to pay, then that person is liable to be prosecuted. In such prosecutions under different coronavirus regulations, the Attorney General has passed statutory instruments that allow these to be prosecuted by way of a single justice procedure. But I'll come back to that in a moment. Now, if the individual pleads not guilty or doesn't want to be dealt with by way of a single justice procedure, he or she will then be prosecuted in open court. And throughout the pandemic, the CPS has reviewed each and every case that has ended up in a prosecution in open court. Paragraph 56 of the government response reads as follows. CPS data shows that a significant proportion of the cases which go to open court are incorrectly charged. These cases will have been through more safeguards than those penalties dealt with by payment through the single justice procedure. So these are cases where the CPS has reviewed the case because it's going to a prosecution in open court. But I said I'd come back to the single justice procedure. So again, where a person hasn't or refused to pay the fixed penalty notice is first going to be dealt with by a single justice procedure, unless the individual pleads not guilty or doesn't want to be dealt with in that way. So what is a single justice procedure? Well, this is where a magistrate and a legal advisor reads the details of a case and delivers a verdict without hearing from the individual charged. But according to the response at paragraph 52, the majority of fixed penalties are not challenged in such a way to lead to a review by the CPS. In September 2020, whilst 122 cases were reviewed by the CPS, 929 cases under the coronavirus regulations were dealt with by way of a single justice procedure. And given the likelihood of errors and the numbers of mistakes found by the CPS in the cases that they review, it's concerning that so many completed prosecutions lack this safeguard. And it goes on to say that the CPS reviews each and every case brought under the Coronavirus Act, as these are prosecuted in court rather than being dealt with by the fixed penalty process. And the numbers show that all of the 252 charges for an offence under the Act relating to infectious and potentially infectious persons were wrongly charged in the period between March 2020 and February 2021. So whilst you'll probably agree that there was a need to have some level of enforcement of these regulations, you would certainly be justified in having some cause for concern. Section 4 of this government response talks about unlawful discrimination when issuing these fixed penalties. And according to the response, the statistics show that fixed penalties were disproportionately issued to certain groups of people. For example, young people and people from certain racial and ethnic backgrounds. The response shows that young people were more likely to receive a fixed penalty notice, although it goes on to say that there should be more information, research and analysis as to why that might be. It seems that men received 72% of the fixed penalty notices, which is strange considering how the lockdown rules affected everybody's daily life. And the response concludes that the way that fixed penalties have been used under the coronavirus regulations has disproportionately penalised some groups over others. Given the human rights engaged by the enforcement of coronavirus regulations, the disproportionate use of fixed penalties seems likely to engage the principle of non-discrimination in the enjoyment of other human rights. So I thought it was important to point out this government response because there's a lot of talk and discussion and debate about the regulations themselves and the penalties that have been enforced and what the government's views are of all of that in retrospect. So I've linked the report down below. You might want to download it and read it to get a full picture of everything that I've said. So finally, what is a COVID passport and how does it work? Simply put, this is your COVID-19 vaccination status. It shows that you've had 2 full doses and you are fully vaccinated against the virus. It's currently available to all those in England who are registered with a GP, and you can get a paper form confirmation of your vaccination status. But remember, whilst you can use this vaccination status as proof of your status when you travel abroad, not many countries are currently accepting it, so you will still need to check the restrictions and regulations of other countries, for example, whether they have mandatory quarantine periods. Again, I'll put a link down below where you can read more about the COVID passport, and no doubt the website will be updated from time to time to show which countries are accepting this vaccination status as proof of your status that you've been fully vaccinated. So let me know in the comments your thoughts on any of the issues raised. Were the penalties right? Were they too high? Do you know someone that's been wrongly issued a penalty? Have you been wrongly issued one yourself? I have no doubt that this will be an ongoing discussion and there will be lots more formal and official announcements in the coming months. So make sure you subscribe and stay tuned, and I will summarise those as they come out. In the meantime, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.